Yeah, my first day with BQool was my best day in sales ever. From using BQool from when I didn't use BQool. It was insane. That's the level of extra sales I would get. Such a great team behind it. Actually seems to take interest in what their customer base is.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We have a very special guest with us today, William Shirley, aka known as the Money Badger. He's here to share his tips and experience that made him a six-figure Amazon seller, a book-selling mentor with 366K and almost 400K followers on TikTok, and a buy box winner of over 50%. He also has a growing Facebook group of over 6,000 people, also a Discord exclusive group, and he's a dad of 5 kids, living the life he desires. Welcome, Bill. Welcome to our show today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Where does the name the Money Badger come from? We are very interested. Like, where is that from?
Yeah, so the fun part about that is when I first started out, I wanted to document the journey that I was going on. And I figured the best way to do that, to gain eyeballs, was come up with something kind of catchy that like stood out. At the time, most resellers were calling themselves flips this or profit that, and it was played out. So I didn't care what I was selling. I just knew I was going to sell something that wasn't sexy, that worked, that brought in the money. And first thing that came to mind was videos that I saw on the internet of the honey badger who doesn't care and kills vipers and eats them and stuff like that. And it's just a little badger. So I was like, you know what? I don't really care. So I'm going to go with the money badger. And it was born.
Oh, that's awesome. I like that. The badger is a fighter, right? And then, I was thinking like he goes fight and gets that money in his hands.
He just doesn't care. Yeah.
He doesn't care, right? So you talked a little bit about when you started, like, why did you start your Amazon business and why do you focus particularly on selling books?
A lot of people are just now starting to realize this, that when Jeff Bezos started Amazon.com, it was mainly books that he was selling. And it just so happens that we still live in a world where there's a lot of people that would prefer to have a tangible book in their hand, whether they're studying for school, learning to do something, or just reading for leisure. So there's that aspect as well. What made me focus on Amazon was that it has, 52% of online sales traffic worldwide. So the eyeballs are there, the traffic's there. You don't have to have an ad spend necessarily in this case. Now, all the pieces just kind of fit together.
Yeah, definitely. Amazon has a huge market share and also it's growing maybe 20-30% in the coming years as well. Could you tell us a little pros and cons about selling books compared to selling other categories? I know you also sell other categories as well.
Yeah, so I recommend that anybody that's starting to sell on Amazon starts with used books. And the reason I say that is because they're cheap, they're abundant, most people can sell them, so you're not restricted in any way to sell them. And the profit margins, like the return on the investment. So you could certainly buy books for a dime, a quarter, 50 cents to $1, and in some cases sell that book for $500 or $300. So the return on investment is unheard of. It's unmatched from anything else that I've ever sold. Some of the downside to that is that some of those books that are going to generate you the higher profit and the higher returns are going to take a little longer to sell. So typically you'll find gentlemen and women across the space selling diapers, candy, grocery items, health and beauty, shoes, things that are very fast moving that are replenishable, but they're faster moving in general. So a lot of times people steer away from that because they want to have inventory turnover. And in any kind of inventory business, that turnover rate is really what's going to determine your success rate.
So you're saying that for books, sometimes the demand for those aren't as strong as maybe some of the everyday items that people are using. And then so there's going to be less demand. So let's talk about books then. Like a year ago, you suggested to your audience to sell genres such as self-help, textbooks, nonfiction, spiritual, religious related books. Why do you recommend people to sell those genres? Do those still hold true?
Absolutely. Yeah. And if not the same amount, definitely they hold true even more. And the reason I say that is because the pandemic in 2020 kind of changed the world. It changed the landscape of everything e-commerce, commerce in general. Businesses across the world were forced with a decision of whether to shut down or be agile enough to adjust to the new marketplace. And DIY, cookbooks, survival, anything that teaches you about something or how to do something is always going to sell better, in my opinion, than fiction, for example. Because I think that this serves a higher purpose of giving you a skill that, like any other knowledge, once you have, nobody can take away from you. Whereas if you read a fiction novel from James Patterson, for example, you get some enjoyment out of it for sure. You reread it if you'd like, and you can enjoy it again, but there's no value add. So you selling that is just going to be somebody willing to read that story for the enjoyment. rather than the skill that they can apply for years to come.
So I'm wondering, like, for yourself, like, do you also read books? Like, what kind of books do you enjoy reading? Like these fiction, these nonfiction? What about yourself personally?
So it's a slippery slope. When you deal with books, you have to be very disciplined not to hold the ones that you find interesting or that you want to read every single time. But you have to know that you're going to be encountering so many books that you can kind of pick and choose, and you can hold on to the ones that you want to read and you can sell the ones you don't. You can always pick those up later. Personally, I read a ton of like chess books. I like to examine some of the old games and work on my strategies because, I like to play chess. It's fun. But aside from that, also, picking up books about negotiation, like Never Split the Difference, that sort of thing. 48 Laws of Power, any kind of self-development is always good. They always say leaders are readers. So if you would expect a CEO of a major 500 corporation to be reading several books a week or a month, you should probably do your best to keep up as well. It never hurts to expand your knowledge.
Yeah, I know Bill Gates, he brings his books around everywhere he goes in his airplane. Like he brings like a load of books wherever he goes. Can you tell us, when you first started, who were some of your early mentors? And what about now? And what do you wish to know you didn't know when you first started that you know now, like based on talking to all those mentors?
Yeah, so particularly with selling on Amazon, my biggest mentor was a gentleman that goes by Reezy Resells. His name is Mike Resendez. He's in California, but he's got over 2 decades of experience. So everything that he put on the internet, I consumed. Before we started selling a book, I consumed 3,000 hours of content because I like to get a well-rounded knowledge of the business that I'm going to be operating in. I don't want to jump into something hastily and not understand fully and then spend a ton of money and then lose it. So some of the things that I wish I knew then that I know now are really the relationship with, Keepa and sales data and how the API actually structures that information. There's a lot of missteps that have happened over the last several years, and mistakes are going to happen. But if you have the information in front of you and you know how to interpret it, you can really minimize that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Reezy Resell as well. And his assistant also starts selling as well. So it's great. I love seeing him go out and flip products. And he was a user of us before. So definitely a big shout out to Reezy. Back to you. Why did you start sharing on social media? Like specifically like TikTok or the private Facebook group? What is some of the most interesting interactions you have because of those channels?
So there's nothing more intoxicating than somebody messaging you or telling you, that you've changed their life or you've opened up their mind to new ideas. And every time that happens, I'm just taken back by it. The fact that I'm recognized in public anywhere is astounding to me. Several years ago, I'm just some dude, some guy that puts videos on the internet trying to take care of his family. But the whole reason I started documenting was just so that I could look back and I could say, okay, I know I'm going to have a tough day. And 6 months, a year from now, I'm going to look back and I'm going to say, okay, well, this is how far I've come. So there's going to be rough days, but if you can reflect on that past, you just can't appreciate the sweet without the sour.
So it's kind of like journaling. You're journaling your growth. You're journaling like what you did, some of the struggles, and then you can see the progress as well and going back.
Precisely. Yeah. So it started off as like documenting and journaling for myself. And then as I started to gain a following, people started to ask questions and it slowly evolved into teaching people how to do it, because at that point I started in 2019. So in 2020, when everything kind of popped off with the pandemic and everybody kind of got laid off or got shut down, they couldn't do certain things to support their family. It just, everything kind of aligned the right way at the right time. And I was able to provide some value to some people that didn't have the value before. And, I only asked that they pay it forward at that point. Since then, the following has just grown and people have really started to be hungry for the information in a climate where people tend to protect that information behind a paywall.
Right. My question is, this is from our audience as well. Like, we just started our TikTok channel. So my understanding was that you started your TikTok channel after listening to Gary Vee, and correct me if I'm wrong, but how did you grow it so fast? Like, which video just exploded for you?
So there's a couple of videos that really took off. It seems like whenever I talk about how many books I've sold or how much I've done in sales in the last year or the last several years or whatever the case may be, those videos really outperform a lot of the instructional content. But they lead people to the instructional content because that's like a hook. It gets people interested in, everybody wants to make the internet money. And I warn them, that it's not sexy, it's hard work. You're crawling through rat-infested bins sometimes, trying to get some of these books. So if you don't have the work ethic, it's not going to be something automatic.
So it's about having this consistency you've mentioned in the past before as well.
Consistency is probably one of the biggest, determining factors of how well you're going to do selling on Amazon. But I've operated on 5 major C's in my life, and they came from my old football coach back in the day: class, character, commitment, consistency, and courage. And they seem like kind of cheesy, but when you break them down, consistency is like, it's so important, especially in business. If you're not going to do the same things that make you successful consistently every single day, I mean, those little things add up to big wins.
Yeah, day in, day out, over and over again. So for TikTok, when you first started, what did you do to get followers? You are very authentic, and I think people really resonate with that.
I try to be very authentic. I try not to sugarcoat it. It's kind of always been my brand to just kind of like put it out there and say, look, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. I've got a potty mouth. I'm not very good at like filtering my language, but at the same time, I'm very effective at communicating a message. And that message typically resonates with my audience. You may not find your videos gaining you a lot of followers, regardless of what content you make. But what you will find is that you'll find the right followers. The right people will follow you because they'll enjoy the message you're trying to, convey, or they'll resonate with it in some way, or they'll find that you're providing value. So it's always about getting the right people to build a community rather than building follower base that you can use as a transaction.
Got it. Talking about learning, what was your Amazon learning curve like for you?
It came really natural. It's probably one of the first things that I've ever noticed that I'm naturally really good at. And it was really surprising. And when you find that like you've got lightning in a bottle, you've really got to just run with it. And I realized very quickly that Amazon is a very deep black hole. And the more the inventory you put in, the more you sell, as long as you understand and operate within certain rules of a category. So I always recommend you stay within the top 1% of a category. I always recommend that there's at least 10 sales in the last 6 months. That way you've got some velocity to the inventory. And then from there, as long as your margins are right, you can't lose.
What's the lowest amount of margin that you're willing to take or that you recommend for people when they first get started?
Yeah, so when you're first starting out selling used books, I recommend that you have nothing less than a $5 return on investment. Now, you can go a little lower than that if you'd like, or if you're confident in like the information I'm giving you. But especially if you're playing with money that you can't afford to lose, you want to be a little bit more prudent about the rules that you're going to apply to your business and the risks you're going to take. So $5 minimum for return on investment, and you want to get the books as cheap as possible. And I encourage a lot of my followers to try to get books for free in some cases, because again, books are viewed by many people as garbage. They're just taking up space. Mom and pop thrift stores have a hard time moving them. They a lot of times don't fit in with the rest of their inventory. You see a lot of like private family-owned thrift stores nowadays segueing more to like a boutique where they have baby clothes that are maybe handmade or by local creators, or wooden toys that are a little bit more niche down. So like a lot of those people, maybe used books don't fit in. So they have a hard time moving them. So if you can find it, like connect with a network of people or businesses local to you and have them donate inventory to you from them, you can't get a better price than free.
Yeah, I think it's a win-win as well because you're helping those people and you're actually recycling the books. So more people could reuse those books rather than just going to the dump, right? So this is definitely
Exactly.
good that we're doing. So what does a typical day look like in the Money Badger's life?
So it depends on the day, but I would say 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week. Get up in the morning, have some food, get to the gas station, get some caffeine because you can't function without some caffeine. Then we source, and I'll hit the same couple of sources probably 2 to 3 times a week. Spends about maybe 12 to 15 hours a day between driving as well, getting inventory. And then on the weekends, usually Friday, Saturday, or Saturday, Sunday, something like that. If we have a really good week, it'll be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We'll spend listing the books, and it'll be all day. Most times we try to get 200 books a day. Sometimes we fall short. Sometimes we go a little bit further than that. I've got about 30 boxes of books. It's roughly 150 books getting ready to go into Amazon right now. So
Well, that's fantastic. Yeah. Putting it into the black hole, into the inventory. The earlier you put it in, the better chance once it's become an active listing, it can start to sell. Tell us about these 850 books, right? Where did you source the books? In the earlier videos, I saw that you went to like booksalefinder.com or the Goodwill Outlet. Do you still recommend those websites or there's other places that you recommend as well?
absolutely, yeah. Book Sale Finder is great. If anybody's looking to get into selling books, maybe they live in a more rural area or they have a lot of competition at their local Goodwills, you can go to booksalefinder.com, and it's a network of the Friends of the Library that'll advertise library sales. And a lot of times they have pre-sales. If you're not at the pre-sale, you might as well not go to the sale because somebody like myself has already negotiated that relationship to either go and help set up or help break it down. And whatever doesn't sell, they usually donate to that person too. So not only do I get first crack at those books, but also I'll get the leftovers at the end. So anything that somebody that's less efficient or doesn't accept that profit level or those returns, or maybe they don't accept books that are ranked over 1 million, that sort of thing, I have no problem scooping them up. Biggest place we get books though is Goodwill Outlets, simply because you can buy them by the pound, or in some cases like a quarter a piece, and you can just fill your cart as many as you can. And it takes a little while to vet the right ones versus the ones that aren't really worth your time, but once you secure some sources, you're solid.
I'm wondering, how do you get this early access or the backdoor access? For example, how do you even get there to the pre-sale, like before people know about it? It's like go to the after party, the after party, like you know where to go. Like how?
Yeah, so you want to be at the pre-party, the pre-game. You want to be
Yes.
at the tailgate before the game, right? So the best thing you could do is build value. And in the past, for example, when we lived in Nashville, we partnered with the Nashville Junior League. And in order to keep books in the hands of readers, and like that charity helps with literacy, right? It's a natural affinity. But you can provide value to a lot of these thrift stores, especially like mom and pop thrift stores, for example, that are struggling with their book inventory. Maybe they get all their inventory through donations, so they've got a few thousand in the back, but they've only got room up front for a couple of shelves. Well, you don't know that until you talk. The best way I would say, if you're going into a new source, is go and find the books, scan all the books. And if you've got a good selection, like maybe you've got a full cart, then you go up to the front, you ask to speak to the manager. That way they see that you're already purchasing. You're already providing that value up front. All you're asking for is if there's anything else that you can buy. So you're just being a good customer. And then by repeating that over the course of several weeks or a month or even several days in some cases, a lot of times those owners or those managers will be like, oh, wow, this is a really good customer. Let me see if I can move a little bit more volume, because they want to look good to their boss. Or if it's a family and they own it, they want to turn that inventory over. They want to make some money. And if you're a guaranteed buy versus putting it on the shelf for maybe later, I think they're going to choose you every single time. At least it chose us most of the time.
So you're kind of helping them out and a repeat
Absolutely.
customer, being a good customer as well. Like it's like going back to the same restaurant and tipping really well. They want to work with you.
They recognize you. Absolutely. They recognize you. They'll be like, oh, hey, Bill, how you doing? Long time no see. Can I get you your usual or whatever the case may be? Absolutely. I think a lot of that, too, goes to like leaving the store cleaner when you leave than when it was when you got there. Because I think a lot of booksellers that exist in the industry now will go in, they'll tear it up. They'll throw books over, they'll put books on top of each other, and it's a mess. And then you go there, you can very clearly tell someone's been scanning books. So if you go there and you clean it up when you're done, you can not only strategically place an emptiness on the shelf at eye level where it's most convenient for them to put fresh books when you leave, but you're also leaving the impression that you care about their store and their establishment and their customers. So it's just a win-win.
So you're respecting and you're having the etiquette to do that as well. It's kind of like having class, what you mentioned about the 5 consistencies.
Precisely.
So let me ask you, like, once you get all these books in, right? How do you filter them? Like whether to sell this book, I sell it, I don't sell it, I sell it, I don't sell it. Like, how do you decide whether to ship the products into Amazon?
Yeah, so you have to be very regimented in the rules that you've put in place, and you have to be focused and diligent to not break those rules. Don't bend them, don't break them. They're there for a reason. And once you set that boundary, you have to respect it. There's a reason that I say, you have to stick to books when you're starting out, especially ranked 1 million or less. And you can stretch that out a little bit once you get comfortable and get your foot in. But you also want to respectfully not accept books that don't have at least 10 sales in the last 6 months, because there's no velocity. And if there's no velocity, then that 1 million ranked book with no sales is only going to be a 4 million ranked book next month, because it's not going to sell. And then it's going to be a dud. And then you've spent money on the book, you've spent money to ship it, you've spent money to store it, and now you're going to spend money to send it back to yourself to get rid of it again. So you don't want to double ding yourself, and that'll eat up a lot of your margins. So that's another reason why you want to make sure that there's also that third piece of what minimum profit you're willing to accept. And that should be commensurate with the risk that you're going to take with a sales rank. So if you want to go with a book that's ranked higher than 1 million, I always recommend that you try to follow a guideline like $10 profit per million in rank. Because what I've found is that it's going to take about a month to sell per million in sales rank.
I see. I got it. Yeah. So you do need to have these stringent filter to make sure that these books can sell. What about certain books that are restricted? I'll give you an example. I was trying to list some books myself, and then some of the books I listed was restricted. I couldn't list them on Amazon. What should people do in those situations?
Yeah, so depending on the book, if it's under the popular textbooks category, unless you already have that ungated and you're not restricted to sell those, you might as well find some kind of other outlet to sell them, whether it be eBay or a consignment service or a buyback company or selling it locally on Facebook, Etsy, that sort of thing. But if
Right.
it's like a small, let's for example say in Nashville, there's a ton of religious books. So maybe it's a small Christian publisher. Well, you might be restricted, but you can go to the Amazon seller app and you can request approval. And depending on the age of your account, what kind of good reviews you have, how long you've been selling, your performance as a seller in general, Amazon will allow you to ungate certain things. And eventually you'll get to something called maximum approval, where you'll basically get approved in whatever you request. Nobody really knows what that is, though. So we all know that at some point it's going to come into play with your feedback and how well you're treating their customers, because we know how Amazon respects their customers. We know that it's got something to do with revenue that you're bringing in, because you want to make sure that you're profitable for Amazon. So you don't want to have a lot of dead stock inventory that doesn't sell and doesn't sell for profit. And then you want to make sure you're taking care of the customer. And if those things are met, I think you'll find that over time, the more things you get ungated in to sell, the more things you'll continue to get ungated in as well. It's kind of like the more you have, the more you'll get.
Yeah, that's like it's not a vicious cycle. It's a good cycle. It's the opposite of that,
Yeah,
right?
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
So, what software do you think is essential for Amazon booksellers to build efficiencies in their businesses?
Perfect. Yeah. So there's three pieces of software that every seller on Amazon needs that's going to sell books anyway. First is going to be a sourcing app. Now, there are plenty out there. I recommend Scout IQ because it's developed for booksellers by a bookseller. The guy that created it is called Caleb Roth. He's the book flipper. You can find him on Instagram. But he's got triggers in there, and they're so like tight by default that you don't have to mess with them. Now, you can, but you don't have to. I still recommend that anybody that's following me just uses the default settings, because it's going to be plug and play. You don't have to worry about changing it and then missing stuff. And you can always mess with it later on, but stick with the defaults when you're starting out. The second piece is going to be listing software, something that's going to make your job a lot easier, because nobody wants to be listing directly on Amazon's website. It just takes about a minute per book, when you could use something like Exceller List, for example, and it takes 5 to 10 seconds per book. So it's literally 10 times faster almost, right? The third piece is going to be repricing software. And that's really where BQool comes in, because you're able to make sure that you've always got the competitive price, that you're able to oscillate up and down in price so that you can aggressively get that buy box. And once you get it, you can squeeze a little bit more profit by pushing the price up a little further. And then now you guys have released, conditional repricing. So you guys are just elevating that service even further. And with those three pieces of software, you really can't go wrong if you follow the rules that you've set in place for your business.
Got it. I'm going to go to the repricer a little bit. That's where we come in. And I'm wondering, in the past, you used other repricers. Some of them are pretty low priced. Why did you pick BQool?
Yeah, so my first repricer I ever used was Repricer. And it's rule-based, it's very simplistic, it's complicated to set up. If you set up one of the settings the wrong way, you could really tank everything in your inventory to a penny, right? So I found out very quickly that that's not the right software for me. And then I went from there to Stellar Engine, and Stellar Engine was a good jump up in price. And again, it was rule-based, it was complicated to use, the user interface was stuffy, and I felt like I was trying to speak another language. Probably the best way, because it was like the engineer that developed it wasn't a front-end guy, so it wasn't like user-friendly. Quickly found out after a month or two that that wasn't the right service. Coming to BQool, it would seem plug and play. There's several rules that were set up. You've got AI slots, so it's conditionally repricing, which is something that I was missing with my other repricers, because it seemed like I would reprice and then it would be amount of time. And then by the time I repriced again, somebody had already gotten the sale. So I can't effectively fight for the buy box if I don't have a chance. So in order to have a chance, you've got to have a software that really knows what it's doing. You've got to have a good team behind it to execute that strategy.
So after you switched to BQool, did your buy box win percentage improve?
Yeah, my first day with BQool was my best day in sales ever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, it's only gotten better. My first day with BQool was my best day of sales ever. I think I 3x or 5x or something like that. It was the first time I had ever done $1,500 a day, in sales. It was the craziest thing ever. And it brought me right back to the first time you buy a book for $1 and sell it for 100 or more, you're hooked, right? So same thing goes with the repricers. I can tell when it's off. I can tell when it's not quite doing what I want it to, and it doesn't seem to have that feeling,
You said about the first day, $1,500. How much of your total sales have increased since after you start using the BQool AI Repricer?
I've gone up at least 50% year over year,
Oh,
at least the
wow.
last couple of years. Yeah. I've started to taper off. We did take about 6 months off this year. So we had to sell through all the inventory we had, which was nice to carry us. But up until this year, which I'm starting to level off a little bit, I would say at least a 50% increase from using BQool from when I didn't use BQool. It was insane. That's the level of extra sales I would get.
Was it also able to save you time or help you with other benefits?
Now that I understand how BQool works, it saves me time. But when I was learning, about putting in the shipping cost and the buy cost manually and then setting my mins and maxes, because when I was first starting out, there wasn't a whole lot of information about how to set up your repricer. Nobody was sharing that information. So anybody that had figured it out was keeping it close to their chest because obviously nobody else figured it out. But now that I've got, a really good working knowledge, or at least I feel like I do, and you guys are always adding stuff. So it's always a challenge to stay up to date, but I feel like I understand and it saves me a ton of time. It's a process now.
Yeah, it's a process. And we also have onboarding webinars for, all the sellers so they can easily learn all the settings. And we also take your suggestions. They're very important to us because as a seller, you're in the front lines, you know what's going on. So if you have, product requests, we're very open to that. And that's what we want. We want something that's easy to use for sellers, made by sellers for sellers.
Exactly. And that's exactly why I love you guys, because it's such a great team behind it. It actually seems to take interest in what their customer base is basically telling them. Look, this is working really well, this doesn't, or I'd like to see that. You don't see that all the time.
It's important because we know that, once you start using our repricer, you need to get results. Otherwise, you're going to cancel, right? Like, why are you paying for something that doesn't work? You just won't do that. So let me ask you, like, for you, how do you pick your rules? And what are some things to consider when you're picking the repricing rules?
So for me, a lot of the times it depends on the rank book that I'm sending in. So if it's a lower rank book, I can afford to be a little bit more relaxed on my strategy. But I find myself selling a lot of books that are in the 600 to 1.7 million rank. So in that little range there, I've got to be a little bit more aggressive with the books that I'm trying to get moving, right? I don't want to have it be like, oh, well, I sent a book in that was ranked 1.6 million with a 70 score, for example, right? And I'll be like, okay, well, that should sell fairly quickly, maybe 4 or 5 weeks. Well, what happens if I'm like just outside of the buy box when that time comes around? I want to make sure that I'm in the buy box. I've got that, ready to go, locked and loaded. And then when the sale is ready to come and somebody's looking for that book, I want to be the one that they buy.
Exactly. Yeah, because if based on what you said earlier, if there's only 10 sales in a month for that, you want to be in that
Right.
buy box when somebody clicks on it. You don't know when, but you want to hold the buy box with the books that you sent in.
Yeah, and that's the biggest difference between a seller that sells a lot of like new items versus used items. Is like you can kind of count it like clockwork, and a lot of these items you can get subscribe and save, like if it's a replenishable. But with a used book, if you're fighting for 10 sales, you've really got to get aggressive, and that's the importance of that buy box. It's everything. If you don't have the buy box, it's tough.
What about for listings that Amazon doesn't award the buy box to anyone? Like, what do you recommend people to do if the buy box is suppressed?
Be patient, because a lot of times you'll see sellers in those cases tank the buy box, or they'll tank the price trying to get the buy box, but there's no buy box to get. And it's really hard to determine which books are going to be like that. So you should always go into it to where you have aggressive repricing, but you've got strict minimum prices you want to go to, because based on the Keepa data and the sales history of this product, where it normally sells at. You don't want to be that guy that goes in there $20 less than everybody else thinking, oh, I'm going to go in and snipe that buy box. And then you end up cutting your nose off to spite your face. You're sacrificing profit. You're destroying the price activity for everybody else to come after you. And at the end of the day, you still don't get the buy box. And maybe Amazon decides to award the sale to somebody that has better reviews because you treat the customer better than you do or whatever. So there's a lot of factors that come into play when it comes to getting the buy box. Amazon doesn't share that with anybody. And those things should still apply. Even if you're not going to get a buy box, you should always try to do those things just to have best practices.
Exactly. So tell us, like, how many hours do you put in your business every week at the beginning? And what about now?
So I'm in a perpetual state of trying to grow. And with that comes all kinds of stuff, trying to put processes in place and build foundation and hire people and network and all kinds of stuff. So I'm probably an anomaly, but I would say we, on average, spend 80 to 90 hours a week on our business. And that's not always counting drive time. You're probably looking at 15 hours a day if you include drive time. So it was 15 times 7, whatever that comes up to. Because the best part is you get sales while you sleep, but as soon as you're awake, you better be ready to work on that business because your inventory is going to sell, but you're only selling 1% of your inventory while it's there. So unless you're replenishing it, you're not growing. So you got to have more going in than you got going out, and everybody's going to reach that point where they're at that break even and they can't outpace their sales. So it's a process.
So how do you save time? Because it seems like, time is quite precious. It's a commodity and you need to get into inventory. You need to go out and spend the money in order to make the money. So how do you save time on any practical tips for our audience?
Yeah. So practical tips for saving time: use calendar apps anywhere you can. Use apps like Habit, and instead of using it to build habits on other stuff, use it for building habits for productivity. So it'll give you push notifications and let you know, like, hey, instead of drink water 3 times a day, it'll remind you to, reprice your inventory, or it'll remind you to check your feedback. But then also, like, to-do lists. If you can put a list of things together that you want to get done in a day and make sure that you stick to that list and you finish that list every single day, slowly add little pieces to that. From an operational standpoint, to save time, you want to make sure that you're getting your inventory in as few places as possible, in as large volume as possible. So you'll naturally start to gravitate to businesses that touch a lot of books. And people that touch a lot of books tend to touch a lot of books and offer it cheaper. Some would think that like a volume-based business would be a natural progression, but then you've got to find a good way to monetize those duds. So you really want to find out what your balance is in your lifestyle and then cater your business around that. So I always try to say, happiness is the goal, money is the byproduct of doing what you love. So you want to find a way to really set yourself up for success any way you can. Otherwise, you're going to be a slave to your business. You want to work on it, not in it.
Right, I get you. Yeah, a lot of people, like, they have a retail shop or something and they're completely locked to the store. And
Right.
that's the reason they probably get into the online business, because they want to have that freedom and that's what they're building for. So talking about that, do you outsource part of your business? If so, what should you outsource and what should you do yourself?
Yeah, so a lot of people like to outsource using VAs. And I would say that if you're going to go that route, you should start off with a VA, find a way to vet them and make sure they have the same work ethic as you do in your business. And then from there, you can start off with tasks that are very minor, like maybe checking Keepa for your inventory you've sourced for the week, for example. Something that's very minor that you still have to do that isn't going to have a major impact on your business in a negative way. And then as you build those tasks up, that VA becomes more and more independent and start to do things that are more crucial to your business. And then from there, you can scale and you can repeat that. And eventually you can put standard operating procedures in place and maybe have that VA help you recruit other VAs. And then you have a team of VAs. You can really build a business that way. I know several sellers that have done that. We don't outsource anything that we do except for like very, very, very minor stuff to a VA. The majority of the stuff we keep in-house. My wife and I are very hands-on, and it's a family business, so my 2 older kids will help out with the business as well.
What do the 2 kids help out with? Like, what do they do? Because I mean, they're learning the business from you as well, right?
Yeah, so the whole goal is to teach them that they don't have to depend on somebody to get a 9-to-5 job. They can provide their own income if they have the work ethic. So we want to teach them the skills so that they don't necessarily have to sell on Amazon, but they can apply those skills in their own business. So my oldest son helps with the listing, and my second oldest helps run like an eBay business on the side. So anything we don't sell on Amazon that we don't want to sell with a consignment service, we'll sell on eBay.
I heard that your son also has a TikTok channel. Is that right?
All of them do. Well, at least the 3 older ones do. One is about anime and like animation that they make. One of them is about gaming. He's really into gaming. And the other one doesn't post, but he's on there.
So, I mean, do you get this? You're like, tell your sons, look, I got so many more views than you guys do, right? Like, is that a topic you guys discuss about sometimes?
No, I think that they're kind of cringed out a little bit that their dad has a following on TikTok. So I'm sure it's embarrassing.
Back to the Amazon part. What's your future plan for your Amazon business for the next 2 to 5 years?
So I think the natural progression for Amazon is that they're going to be pushing sellers in the direction of wholesale. And the reason I say that is because they're getting more and more stringent about the people they're letting on the platform. The people that are on the platform are becoming restricted again in stuff that they weren't previously restricted in. And then the business model with increasing fees, it seems like the only logical way not to get an intellectual property claim or any kind of claim about authenticity is to have an invoice. So that just lends itself right there that you've got to work with a distributor. And if you got to work with a distributor, might as well go wholesale, because the only way you're going to get profit is to buy it cheaper. You know, profits are made on the purchase, not the sale. Everything else is just extra. So I think that wholesale is probably the way we'll go. I'd like to experiment with private label down the road, but I'm not 100% sure. We'll just see where it goes. But I don't see books going away. I think textbooks might change, but I think people are still going to want a physical copy in their hand. So we'll see what happens. I don't think it's going away.
Yeah, there's no better feeling going to the beach, bringing a book and having that sand, going in the pages when you come back. It's a good feeling. Better for your eyes as well. Yeah. So what would you encourage your friends and family if they're starting out today on Amazon or any e-commerce? What would you recommend for them?
Start with a category that you know a lot about or that you're interested in. Because even if you don't know a lot about it, if you're interested in it, learning a lot about it is going to be super easy. I'm a really big proponent for starting out with books because it teaches you the platform at such a low risk point, right? So you can get started. Like I got started on Amazon with less than $50.
Less than $50? Wow.
Yeah, I didn't use a scanner. I didn't use any software except for Amazon, all the native stuff. Now it's longer and you could bootstrap yourself, but the amount of risk you're taking starting on Amazon selling used books versus private label or wholesale, the barrier to entry is completely different. To go into retail arbitrage, online arbitrage, you're probably going to want to start with nothing less than $500. You really should start with nothing less than 1,000 so that you can purchase enough inventory. With books, you don't have to worry about the huge buy cost because books are a dime, a quarter, $1. They're super cheap. You could really luck out. You might go out, find a couple of books that are worth a couple $100, buy them for $1. Next thing you know, you got a bankroll and you can start your business from there. So I'm a really big proponent with if you want to start on Amazon, start with used books. If you want to start e-commerce in general, you may want to go to a thrift store and you may want to sell it on eBay or Etsy or Whatnot or any of those other apps and just stick with a category that you already know about. My wife knows so much about antique Pyrex and it's ridiculous. And you can buy them fairly cheap and you can flip them for like 20, 50, $100. I don't know anything about Pyrex. I mean, I know a little bit more now, but that's just an example of like something she knows a lot about and she's comfortable doing versus something I'm not. And I think the more you're interested in it, the more money you can make.
Yeah, so it's about finding that niche that you know well. And then I like what you said about starting out in books because you're not putting a lot of investment up front. And you might be lucky. You might strike a book and that might be $100, on the market you never knew about. Is there anything else you would like to share with our audience?
I can't really think of anything. Just believe in yourself. A lot of times you'll see somebody like me on the internet or you'll see somebody else on the internet making a ton of money and they'll flash their sales, right? They'll flash, 7-figure Amazon seller, 6-figure Amazon seller. I did 20,000 last month, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But they never show you the profit. They never show you their payouts. They always show you their sales. That should ring true to you when it comes to everybody you see on Facebook that you're friends with posting their highlight reel. No one's posting the negative behind the scenes stuff. They're not posting about the argument they had with their wife or their husband or, the car breaking down. They're posting the highlight reels. So don't get down on yourself. Trust the process. Don't be afraid to learn. Don't be afraid to fail. The more you fail, the more you learn. But make sure you learn from those mistakes. There's going to be plenty of them. And the number one thing that I would say to anybody watching this that wants to get started in anything is document it. You don't know where it's going to go, but I can tell you this, that there's going to be a time 6 months from now, a year from now, where you're having a bad day, you're struggling, you don't know what end is up, you don't know what to do. Just reflect, go back to some previous posts when you first started out, look how far you've come, and then trust the process and trust in yourself. And you really get to figure out what you're made of when you do that.
I like what you say, trust the process. That's like the 76ers there, from where you're from right now, right?
Yeah, isn't that the truth?
So if our audience, where can they find you? Like which channels?
Yeah, so I'm on all platforms. Instagram, I'm the.money.badger. I'm the Money Badger on TikTok, no periods. And then I'm the Money Badger on YouTube as well. William Shirley on Facebook. You can find me everywhere, all platforms, but you'll find me most on TikTok. The best way to get a hold of me is DMs too. I try to answer every DM. It might take me a while, but
Yeah, we'll have all the information in the description below. And William, I know that you have a new Discord group, a very exclusive group that is capped. And these are for the people who want to really grow their business. What can people expect when they join this Discord group that is gated as well, right?
Yeah, so it's a closed Discord. It was actually the community's idea. It wasn't mine. People were asking for more access to me. They wanted to put a little bit of skin in the game to kind of cut away from some of the noise. A lot of people are asking questions that have no intention of following through, but these people, they do follow through. They want to grow their business. They want to take it serious, and they want to have access to me to be able to help them walk through things. But more importantly, they're going to have a community where they can kind of bounce ideas of the wins and losses, what's working, what's not working. In that Discord, we do weekly calls. You can schedule one-on-one time with me if you have to work through an issue or you need help with examining a certain piece of your business. I help with ungating in different categories, different products. I'm trying to work on putting bolos together for people who want to branch into retail arbitrage and online arbitrage. But by me capping it into a small group, it gives people the ability to kind of like come up together and share successes in a very private and exclusive atmosphere where they're not going to feel judged. It's like a judgment-free zone where, hey, I make mistakes. I'm going to learn something from these guys just as much as they're going to learn from me. And that's the attitude that I try to take to all of my content.
So for this closed group, how much does it cost to join?
So when it first launched, it was $50, and that was the bare minimum price. It was $50 a month. But after it closed with that first round, I told everybody, look, the price is going to go up from here. So if you're in, you're locked in at that price. And now the price is $75 a month. But for anybody that's listening with your community, your audience, I'm going to put a coupon code together where you guys can still get in for $50. Yeah, the group size is never going to get any bigger than 250 people. So it's going to be capped at a very small crowd.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. Well, that's like a $25 discount. Yeah, and this is from somebody who is a six-figure seller. He was selling on books, expert in this. He's been doing this for many, many years. He also mentors many, many people. So everybody, make sure to go follow the Money Badger. Also, check it in the description below. And thank you for your time today. I know you're a very busy man. Really appreciate your time. Thank you, Bill.
I appreciate you having me. Thanks again. I appreciate it.